The balance sheet is just popular survey found that more people are afraid to run out of money than they are to die.
If you have the fear of running out of money, that it's almost crippling across everything that you do.
So we need to ask this question then, how long am I going to live? I can't know that answer. The second is, what kind of returns will I get? I won't know that answer either. You just start to have the scarcity mindset.
Yes. I put together a challenge for you. I said, if someone's 25, does this make sense? You said yes.
Right.
Someone's 35, does this make sense? Yes. 45, 55. How would you design a portfolio that could mathematically show them a better way?
I got so guilty that this was so good. 6% of that 4.059 number is $205,000, which is $43,000 more than the 4% rule.
Early on, they have less money going to equities. So everyone's freaking out. 25 years old, you're putting money into whole life insurance.
When we add the cash value, this person actually has more money than the prior example.
Not only does the fifth option give way more income, less risk, but there's so many other benefits of insurance that's not even showing up here. Where does actuarial science not help somebody?
Well,
Walter Young, welcome to the Nashville studio.
yes, it's fun to be here.
You've been on the show a couple times.
I have.
You've spoken at my event a couple times.
I have.
And you've written this phenomenal book, The Fifth Option. It's fun. I interviewed a person the other day, and he name dropped you.
Is that right?
And he just finished your book, and he loved it.
Is that right?
And the reason people loved our episode that we did together and loved this book is you've taken math. You've brought receipts when it comes to the math of retirement and what you talk about the fifth option, which we'll talk about this in this interview. But you also have an ability to communicate, tell stories in such a way that is not intimidating. So you bring receipts, but you're able to teach in such a way that is very inviting. Today's episode, we're not only going to cover some of the concepts in the fifth option, but I put together a challenge for you.
Right.
And it took us weeks
Yes.
at going back and forth to make sure that we could get this right. But I said, if someone's 25, does this make sense? You said yes.
Right.
Someone's 35, does this make sense? Yes. 45, 55. And I just gave you random scenarios. And I just said, if this random person came to you with these random numbers, how would you, in your infinite knowledge, winky face, how would you design a portfolio that could mathematically show them a better way using the principles of your book?
Correct.
So I want you all to know that not only are we going to go deep on the philosophy, but we actually are going to go through Excel, and you have spent time grafting out the 25-year-old, 35-year-old, 45-year-old, and 55-year-old, walking down what the typical way is, and then taking some of the principles in the fifth option. This is going to be a fun episode. But before we dive right into Excel and appeal to like the 10 people that would be like, oh, I can't wait. For those of you guys can skip ahead if you want. We're going to really set the stage, because I think it is so important to understand this philosophy. And if you don't get it, it can be a struggle. And we're talking about especially how to integrate actuarial science into retirement planning, and how that can be the key that unlocks so many more options. And even the way that you sign this book is enjoy your options.
Right.
And so I love that. So without further ado, welcome, and let's have fun.
Yeah, I'm excited. Yeah, what could be more fun than talking about actuarial science, right?
Actually,
I get excited about it.
I love it.
All right, Caleb, before we get into the spreadsheets, I think it's important to go through a little conceptual overview. So let me just walk through some concepts to help build to the fifth option, and then I think that'll help the viewers really understand the spreadsheets when we get to them.
Amazing.
All right, great. So I think one of the things that's really important to understand is this: getting to retirement is not the same thing as getting through retirement, right? So we always talk about getting to retirement. We see those commercials on TV, but we never understand what does that back half of retirement planning really look like, right? In fact, there was I wrote a short story with my co-author that we did a joke about the fact that as we're climbing our financial mountains, as people usually use that metaphor, that we had a gentleman who was interviewing Sherpas that was going to get him up and down the financial mountain. And as he interviewed the town, the recommendation was these brothers. And these brothers were the best, the guides that were going to get you up to the financial mountain, or we'll call it maybe Mount Everest. But he didn't want to pay for two Sherpas. So he decided to take the next best Sherpa. And when they climbed Mount Everest, that Sherpa decided to go into the lodge and said, I don't know how to get down. I only know how to get up, right? But the brothers knew how to get up and down, right? And so the idea is that there's two parts of this journey, right? So getting to retirement is not the same thing as getting through retirement. And that back half is the complexity, right? I think we're at a point in time now where people understand contribution to 401ks and investments and things, right? They understand accumulation theory now. Where the confusion is and the risk and the challenge really is the distribution side of the house. Right?
Yeah, there's a lot of things on the internet, dollar cost average, heavy fees can be really problematic, long-term compounding, the power of compounding, all those good things are great. but there's also the compounding effect of understanding with the end in mind.
Right.
And so there's an aspect of, yeah, if you're 70 years old and you come to somebody, are there options? Yes. Are there more options if you come to them at 30, 40,
right.
50,
Yeah.
and you do some proactive planning? Absolutely. And so it's one of those aspects where I find that most people, their only focus is on the accumulation, and there's not a lot of education. There's not a lot of TikTok videos
right.
talking about distribution
That's right.
options.
Yeah.
But the reason you're accumulating is for the distribution.
Mm-hmm.
And so instead of the net worth, we should be focused on the cash flow.
That's right.
Speaking to the choir, but I just want to.
Yeah, and I think you can even go back and look at some of the founding fathers of modern portfolio theory who won all the Nobel prizes for their the way that they manage money today. All individually have said how hard retirement income planning is, because when the modern portfolio theory really assumes the long run, or there's no end in sight of the actual investment horizon, but when we're people, there's an end, right? And so as we get closer to the end, it changes the distribution and how we need to do that. And it's tricky and it's challenging. I think that's why a lot of people just don't talk about it, because it is really hard to explain on a TikTok video. I get 2 minutes to tell you how distribution planning works. It just doesn't work that way. So yeah, so getting through retirement is not the same thing. Getting to retirement is not the same thing as getting through retirement. So the goal is really to provide a structure that people can follow, right? And it's cash flow focus, right? As you mentioned. And that's a really shift in mindset for lots of folks that I think we want to do. So I ask this question often in a lot of the webinars that I do and seminars I do, which is, what does financial freedom mean to you? And when I ask that to a room full of people, at first they're all shy and don't say a word, right? And then they start to say things like being able to do what I want to do, how I want to do it, or being able to spend time with family or travel. And you get all these wonderful qualitative answers. And the reality is no one ever tells me $3 million or $5 million, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
Because people can't quantify in their mind a dollar amount and how that translates into the things they want to do. And that's really part of the challenge. And so we understand that at some point, financial freedom really in a pragmatic way is I have to go from earned income to be able to have passive income, right? If I don't ever make that jump, I never get to retire.
That's right.
And so that's what really that's that goal, the end in mind is really talking about, is how at some point can I transition from having to earn my income to having a passive stream of income that'll support me all the way through my life, right? That's really the goal here. So how do we get here? Well, we might want to take a little bit of a history lesson and understand at the turn of this 20th century, the idea of retirement just didn't exist. Right? Life expectancy was low. You just worked until you either died or your body just broke down and you lived with your family or became a ward of the state, right? That really was the plight of the person, really from the beginning of time up until maybe the Industrial Revolution, right? And so in 1875, something very important happened, which was the very first private company introduced a pension, and that was American Express. And the idea behind that pension was that they wanted to give some dignified way for people to leave the business, but also, no different than today, attract great talent, right? And so by offering them a time period you work for us and then a pension at the end of the day, really changed that idea.
I'm assuming American Express is not the credit card company. Different American Express.
Right,
okay.
Right. And so so that was the first one. So we talk about the three-legged stool, which is, all right, pension plans, Social Security, which came around in the 30s, and of course, savings was the third one. And what we know about that today is, of course, pension plans are all gone. People are arguing about whether Social Security is going to make it, and average Americans are having a hard time saving. So this really robust structure that really kept us going for decades and decades is now changing completely, right? And so that onus falls on the individual. In fact, I've told people lots of times that you are more responsible for your own financial outcome than ever before, right? And unfortunately, we haven't been taught how we're going to go and succeed with that framework. Right? And at the same time, the financial advisors might be becoming great at they may become imperfect financial advisors for an economy that doesn't exist anymore.
Oh, interesting.
Right? So we have these two kind of working dynamics that are working against the average person, which is what we're really up against, right? So in a weird way, we're a lot like those workers in the 1900s, right? We don't have the pensions, we might not have Social Security, and savings is tight, but we're going to live a whole lot longer than the folks in the 1900s, right? And so that means these dollars have to somehow, that planning has to persist for a longer period of time than maybe they did in the 1900s. And so when we think about the biggest fears when it comes to retirement, I put a list out there. People tell me like inflation, taxes, health care, right? Market crashes, running out of money are all the top components to this thing. But the reality is the biggest risk we face is longevity. Right? And so we know that longevity is what magnifies all those other expenses. So if I die early, inflation doesn't matter, right? But if I live a long time, it matters a lot.
Here's a retirement strategy. Die at
Die
65,
early,
and you
right?
probably won't have a retirement problem.
Yes, if you promise me that, then we will be able to figure out the math, right?
So it's one of the greatest blessings of living longer in medicine and all has created challenges.
Yeah.
It's
Exactly right.
ironic.
Yeah, and who knows with future, discoveries how long people really will live.
For sure.
Right? Yeah.
I mean, if
So,
people start living to 110, 120, even our conversations would have to shift.
Yeah.
But then I think it's realistic to say retiring at an arbitrary 60 might not be realistic if you're going to live another potentially
right.
50 or 60 years.
Right, yeah.
Because the back in the day, Social Security, a lot of people didn't even see Social Security.
That's right.
So it's just one of the fact that now it's the thing that people are planning, and some people are living off of Social Security for 30 plus years.
Yeah.
This was not, I think, even on anyone's
On the
radar when it was first created.
Yeah, the dirty little secret is most people weren't going to get Social Security, right? It was really meant for the people that had that longer than the average life expectancy. Today, we're all past that, right? And so we live decades into Social Security.
It would almost be like if Social Security was at age 83.
Right. Yeah, right.
It's like some people, but it's not going to be the thing that most people got.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Yeah. And in fact, when it comes to longevity, a popular survey found that more people are afraid to run out of money than they are to die.
More people are afraid to run
out of money than they are actually to die.
Oh, that's sad.
Right? It was a crazy
really
thing,
sad.
which I argue would not have been the case a generation ago because you weren't going to run out of money. You had a pension. Right?
Which that creates so many other problems of scarcity and people just not living well. If you have the fear of running out of money, that it's almost crippling across everything that you do.
Yeah. And in fact, I have two characters in the book. One is a teacher that has a pension, and then the other person has a couple $1 million that retired from business. And the teacher lives happily because every month that teacher gets their pension. They know how to budget. They know they're going to spend it because it's coming again. And they juxtaposition to the other person who won't spend any money because they're just so worried about the fact that it needs to last. And so that's right. It creates a level of scarcity. It also changes just your mindset of having to spend your money or wanting to spend your money. Right. So I think that's an important concept for sure. So the longevity comes with two questions that we have to answer, right? The first one is how long we live, which we can't know. And the second is how well will your money perform, which we also won't know. And those are the two questions that make it very hard to understand retirement income planning. I don't know anybody out there, they're engineers, but my son's an engineer and he had to figure out differential equations. And so here we are, we have two variables, and how can you solve for them? They're very challenging. That really is the modern retirement quandary, is having to be able to answer those two questions. And so one of the things that I turn to help people understand a little bit how to reframe themselves in this idea of retirement income planning is the difference between personal finance and corporate finance. So corporate finance really is around cash flow and profits and earnings, the movement of money, right? You go on CNBC and you see CFOs talking about their profits, right? And how well their revenues are hitting and their future forecasts. But in the personal financial side, we're really stuck in balance sheets, right? The question we always want to know is how much? How much have you saved? How much can you save? And so there's really a big difference between those two. So even though the personal finance and corporate finance, they share the same word finance, they manifest themselves completely differently. And so what I want to begin to challenge people is to start thinking more like themselves as a business, more like corporate finance in terms of maximizing cash flow. Cash flow is what shareholders reward CFOs for, not a balance sheet, right? A balance sheet is always helpful. It's always a good indication of things to come, but it is not in itself cash flow, right? That's why you don't see CFOs on CNBC talking about their balance sheets, right? Because they know that that's not the end story. The end story is how do I turn that into robust cash flow? That's how we get rewarded. And so I want you just to think about that. You can't go take your 401k statement and go into any kind of grocery store and buy milk with it, right? I don't care if it has $1 million in it or not. You can't do that, right? And so the idea is you have to be able to turn it into cash flow. And the more efficiently you do that, the better off you're going to be. For example, if you have $1 million and I have $1 million and you can produce $60,000 and I produce 40, we have the same balance sheet, but who's the winner?
I'm a more efficient.
Right. You're the winner, right? So that's what we want to be thinking about, is that efficiency that we can take a look at, right? I kind of joke with clients that balance sheet is just BS. Right? That's what it stands for. So in the book, there's this great parable that we call the Desert Island Dilemma. And in it is, I think, a great story that helps people understand this new way of thinking. And it goes like this. Caleb, imagine you washed up on a desert island. And as you pull yourself out of the sand and into the beach, you look around and realize it looks deserted. There's nobody on it. And you begin to wonder to yourself, is there any water on this island? And luckily, you look at the shoreline and there's a barrel that's floating, bobbing up and down. And you run down, you grab the barrel, you open up the lid, and you can smell the sweet smell of fresh water. And you start drinking greedily because you're so thirsty. But then the thought hits you, wait a minute, is this all the water I have on this island? And Caleb, if that's all the water you have on this island, how much water are you going to drink?
I drink as little as I can to get by.
Right. And there's two questions that you would like to know so that you can figure that out. First of all is, well, how long I might be on this island for?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you look around and you don't see any ships. There's no planes over sight. You might be on the island for a while. And second is, will it ever rain? And you look up in the sky and it's blazing sun. And so if we don't
I would
know,
have more questions than two. Yes,
Okay,
yeah,
yeah.
according to the water. Yes,
Yeah.
that's correct.
Right. And so the question then is, if I don't know how long I'll be on the island for, and I don't know if it'll ever rain, then your answer is absolutely correct. I will drink as little as possible to stay alive
Yes.
so I can be rescued.
Yes.
But now let's change the scenery. Let's pretend that instead of being on a desert island, I'm in my office on my last day of work. And my boss gives me a barrel of money. And as I'm driving home, I'm thinking of all the fun things I'm going to do with this barrel of money when the thought hits me, wait a minute, this is all the money I have in the world. So we need to ask this question then, how much money can I spend? Well, two questions might come to mind. First is, how long am I going to live? I can't know that answer. The second is, what kind of returns will I get? I won't know that answer either. So Caleb, if I don't know how long I'm going to live and I don't know what returns I'm going to get, how much money can I spend each day?
As little as I can get to get by.
That's right. You just start to have the scarcity mindset
Yes.
because I don't know the answer to that question. And so most people, that's what they really are struggling with, is understanding how much can I really take out of a retirement account, not knowing my longevity or knowing returns. And that's what makes this so challenging. So let's take an example, like a real life kind of example that sometimes I work with in group settings, which is, let's assume that you can earn 14.89% on average over the market.
Okay. I'll sign me up for that.
Now
That's more generous than Dave Ramsey.
I'm going to just throw out there a disclaimer that if you ever said, I promise you could do this, I'm going to deny it and admit I never said that. But let's just assume there was a period of time where that actually did happen. And let's ask the question then, if you can earn 14.89%, would you be comfortable taking out 10%, knowing there'd be a profit?
Of course.
Right? The room always shakes their head and says, yes, that makes sense. And let's assume that we're going to do this for a 30-year period of time. So if I start off with $1 million and I take out 10%, then I'm taking out $100,000 each year, right? And so I have an effective withdrawal rate of about 10%. And so sure enough, here's a graph that shows that, right? So we can see we have 14.89%. I take out my $100,000. At the end of it, I have $15 million, and your kids are probably my best friend, right?
Yeah.
But something should look a little off, right? If retirement planning was this easy, there wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah. And by the way, there's some financial gurus that make it sound this
Like
easy.
yes,
if
right.
you average X, you should be just conservative to take out 8%.
Right.
You should be,
Yeah.
that's I've heard people say that.
Yes.
And it makes logical sense.
Right.
If you're just saying basic numbers.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And in fact, I've also seen that some of these gurus say that because people are so hopeless if it's anything less than that they're just trying to not, squash their dreams in the future. But that doesn't relieve us of giving people good math, right? So which is what we want to do. So the idea behind this is, when I present this in groups, is that people, they look at this and they struggle for a little bit trying to figure out what's wrong. And so then eventually someone says, well, the 14.89% is the same number all the way through. And so we have to acknowledge that is exactly right? This is a linear return. This is what a lot of software and financial planning software does. You put in a certain rate of return and it projects that same number all the way through, right? And so it's really hard not to put together a planning software without some sort of linear projection, but we have to understand that there's flaws to that. Because if you take a look at the history between 1970 and 1999, this is what really happened. So you can see that there's lots of different numbers, positive, negative,
and was
big
the
and
average
small.
return during
And the
that
average
time?
was 14.89%, right?
Okay, during that time.
Yeah, so if I take the 30 years and scramble up the numbers and divide by 30, I get 14.89% every single time, right? So the average isn't not the problem. The problem is that if I put that sequence of return in before, right, then you can see that I run out of money. And simply the real answer to why this is happening is very simple, that in years 1, 2, and 3, I'm okay because I had good returns, but then years 4 and 5, I have negative returns. So if I'm taking money out of a portfolio during a down market, I've exacerbated a loss with a withdrawal.
Go back to the other slide.
Mhm.
The other slide you had back.
This one?
Yeah, the other slide you had $15 million of a balance, and you took out $100,000 each year.
Right.
Now, when you showed actual returns during a certain period of time where there was the same average,
Mhm.
you ran out of money in year. What is it? Year
13, yeah.
13.
Mhm.
So we've taken out 1.3 million,
Mm-hmm.
and you have no more money left.
Right, yeah.
That's a very interesting and powerful example.
Yeah, so if you take a look at years 5 and 6, for example, I'm almost halfway through my money, right? Because I had 2 years of drops and I took out large chunks of money.
Yeah.
And the problem is that when I have those good years, like years 6 and 7, they're not acting on the original million. they're acting on a much smaller number. And so it just can't get back to where it once was, right? And so clearly I can't take out 100,000 or that 10%, right? And we all intuitively know that was probably the case. But here's what I want people to understand about averages. I have a bucket of 0 degree water, and I have a bucket of 200 degree water, and I put a foot in each bucket. On average, I should be comfortable, but I really have 2 unhappy feet.
Yeah, for sure.
That's the risk of what averages do to us. And so the whole idea behind the fifth option and the work that all the people that preceded that have done is really to help us understand what is a withdrawal rate strategy that can work, right? And so we probably all have heard of the 4% rule, the famous Bill Bengen rule that came out, where he took rolling 30-year periods of time from 1926 to 1956 and 1927 to 1957, and he just asked the question, what is the max I could take out so that I made it through with $1 with each of those rolling 30-year periods of time? And it turned out that in one series, about 4% was the max I could take out because it didn't make it all the way through, and that became known as the 4% rule. And so the idea behind that is simply that we now have a barometer of what can work. Now, the dirty little secret is that many times significantly more than 4% can work. But none of us want to understand if our strategy worked and find out 30 years from now if we were the right one or the wrong one. So that's why people are so conservative, is because we can't afford to run out of money, right? Yeah. And we don't want to get to a place where we're realizing there's no recovery from where I am today. And so people use 4% as that standard rule.
It's the classic airplane example. It's like, hey, this airplane's going to land 85% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
How often are you going to get on?
Right.
Nobody. I don't think anyone's going to get on with that type of stats. Same thing goes when it comes to retirement. There is a lot of scenarios that more than 4% would work.
Mm-hmm. Almost all of them, quite frankly, right?
Yeah. But the reason why it's hard to predict is you don't want to be the person that it doesn't work out for.
Yeah, exactly right. That's well said. And so there's a lot of argument about the 4% rule. There's people that think it's closer to 3. There's people that think maybe it's closer to 4.5. And the part that I find interesting is that some of the academics who are more investment focused are arguing about basis points, like it's 4.25 or 4.5%, right? It's like this minuscule change overall, is certainly helpful, but it's not worth, the pound of pain that it goes through it, right? And I'd rather be able to figure out, how do I get to 6 or 8% withdrawal rates?
Yes. That
moves the needle, right? Even Bill Bengen has come out with a new number that's higher than the 4% rule. And he kind of, one of his LinkedIn posts was cheeky and said, we'll find out if it works 30 years from now, right? Which is really the truth, right? Yeah. And the idea was that now there's a lot more investment accounts that you can do, because the original Bill Bengen study had 2 asset classes, and now there's, of course, lots of other asset classes you can invest in, which I imagine might increase the safe withdrawal rate.
But also increases potential risk, because there's some of these investments don't have track records.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's like, you could get something, but you have to factor in the beta that you might be taking when it comes to volatility. And the concept of your book is the 4% rule is an option.
Mm-hmm.
What if there were other options that you could do, and such by doing more options should give you better outcomes than less options?
Right, exactly right. So let's kind of move on to the fifth option of the book and some of the principles. And so when people learn about the 4% rule, the first thing they start doing is their own math, right? Which basically really easily says, for every $1 million I have, I can take out about $40,000. And so people are realizing how little that really is. And so then the question they're going to go run and ask their traditional advisors is, how do I do better than this, right? And so the traditional advice would tell you what I call the 4 frustrating options, which is save more money. And the interesting thing about saving more money is sometimes you can't. But if I can, I'm really have this challenge between current lifestyle and future lifestyle, right? I'm forgoing today's lifestyle by not having some enjoyment in hopes that it'll be there later on, right? And so that can be a juxtaposition that people aren't necessarily excited about. The second is taking more risk, right? Well, okay, taking more risk is really code or trying to get better returns. But at some point, risks can be funny and turn around and bite you if you're not careful. And most of the time, people are looking to offload risk more than they are trying to take on risk. Right? The third is working longer. And that's certainly becoming more popular. But the reality is, I tell some of my folks that are a little bit older is to look around and see how many people your age or older than you are still at work. And so it's not a given in today's world that you will keep your job all the way through age 67 or 70, whatever you're hoping to do. And then, of course, the fourth option is just to understand you're going to live on less, right? And just sadly,
most people are doing.
Sadly, that's the path you're going to be on. But Caleb, wouldn't it be exciting if there was a fifth option?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be amazing if there was a
someone
fifth
wrote
option?
A book called The Fifth Option,
right?
Yeah.
Which outlines another strategy, another theory that we take from the academic giants and say, okay, how can we take the message that they have? Like if you think about Copernicus' story, those are the manuscripts that we need to make sure are getting out there, right? There's a new way of thinking that I think is helpful for most people to do. So in the book, what we talk about is we compare everything to the safe withdrawal rate, right? The safe withdrawal plan, the 4% rule. And so there's 3 strategies that I outline in the book. The first is called beat the bear. The second is a bucketing strategy, right? That's pretty common and popular out there. And the third one's pension 2.0, right? And so I'll go through these kind of briefly, but we'll turn to the spreadsheets to really maybe get more in depth with those.
Cool.
So we can get into the details there. So beat the bear, let's just think about what that conceptually means. So beat the bear means that I want to be able to handle the negative markets that ultimately will happen to us, right? We know every decade there's maybe 2 or 3 downturns in the market. Some are severe, some are mild, but nonetheless they're going to be there. And so the question is just how can I divide my money into different roles where I have some money that's in the markets and some money that's in a non-correlated safe space so that I can turn to those dollars when markets are negative. And the people that I think this is best for are the people that are very comfortable with risk, right? That they plan to keep money in the markets. Part of their vacation is to turn on CNBC and get excited about, the investments they're making and being comfortable with that, but knowing that they need some ability to navigate the negative markets, right? Because if I can navigate negative markets, then my portfolio money can last longer, right? And that's the idea behind the beat the bear approach. And so the idea there is that if I can get 4 to 6 years of money in a non-correlated asset, then I can increase that withdrawal rate from.
When you say 4 to 6 years of income.
Of income, yeah.
Income supplement.
Thanks for clarifying that. 46 years of
income. In
income.
an asset that's not correlated to market volatility.
Right. Something doesn't follow the markets up and down. That's completely has its own trajectory. Then I'm able to go from a 4% withdrawal rate to something closer to 6, 7, and in some cases perhaps even 8. Right. And so that just unlocks dollars and gives me more income. And it really allows, if you go back to the 4% rule, what it really is saying is that the 4% rule is low because I have to deal with the negative markets. Well, the more years I'm not dealing with the negative markets, the more I can actually take out truer returns that I'm actually averaging over that period of time.
Yeah, if you could go back and delete 4 to 6 years of bad years, it looks totally different. It changes
everything, right? Yeah, exactly. So let's talk a little bit about bucketing strategy. Bucketing strategy is kind of this midway point. And I guess, to be quite honest, every strategy is a bucket strategy, right? So if some people have a 60-40 portfolio, congratulations, you have a 1 bucket strategy, right? Sometimes people have cash in the bank and then they have their portfolios, you have a 2 bucket strategy. But a 3, kind of an average 3, maybe some other people talk about a 5 bucket strategy, but a very simple 3 bucket strategy would be considered a now, soon, and later bucket. Where the now bucket is really anything that's for that first year retirement, any planned expenses in that first year, and any emergency money that makes you feel better sleeping at night, money that you can access in a bank or something like that. Right? The soon bucket really is that next period of time, maybe that next 9 years of where I put money into it for income purposes, right? And their job is to get me through that period of time, and hopefully in a relatively safe investment or a place for money, so that markets don't impact that very much. And the idea is that I can now have a view of 10 years of income that has a high degree of certainty to it. And then the later bucket is where I can put money that's at risk, right? And in a very simple terms, if the later money kind of does the normal rule of 72 and I'm earning 7% on it, then it doubles every 10 years. Well, guess what? I can refill the soon bucket with those dollars every 10 years, and I just kind of rinse and repeat. So the idea behind the bucket strategy is I'm giving my money jobs, specific jobs, and time periods to do those jobs. And then there's many different ways that you can create the buckets, of different iterations of strategies, things you can do with the bucket strategy. But the idea that's different from a 60-40 portfolio is I'm separating dollars now into jobs so I can pick very specific products for that job as opposed to just kind of a blob portfolio. The third strategy that's in the book I call Pension 2.0. And so Pension 2.0 really is a take on the old pension maximization story, which most of the audience will never heard of pension maximization. But back in the old days, if someone had a pension, they had a number of different ways they could access that pension. And if I wanted the most money, I would take what's called a life-only option, which means the pension is as good as I'm alive, right? A lot like Social Security. But there's a lot of folks that took that option, but then they realize that when they pass away, their spouse may not get any of those dollars, and that would be a problem. So people started to realize, okay, I need to take a smaller pension so that I could have a pension that lasted as long as either of us might live, right? And so in order for me to choose that higher pension again, I could buy a life insurance policy that allowed my wife to earn the money should I pass away early. But if I live a long time, then I got the biggest distribution possible and the life insurance policy along with it, right? And so that's what was the old days called pension max. Today, with pensions being gone, right, we don't have that selection. So we have to really recreate that using the insurance companies as a way to recreate a pension. Why I call it 2.0 is simply because now we can be very specific about the pension amount we might want, right? Maybe I need $20,000 a year, maybe I need 50 or 100,000. I can be very specific and strategic about how big that pension is, and be able to create that retirement income stream between those. So that's the three strategies. The pension 2.0 really is for people that have a lot more need for probability, don't really like risk. Maybe they don't ever watch CNBC ever again. They just want to be on a cruise somewhere, not worry about the fact that their income's coming in every single month.
And again, not that I'm young, but if I was in a position to decide, I would want the money that I would want as like baseline. I'd want that coming in from a pension, and then everything else I would love to have that be kind of more upside liquidity. That's what I personally would do. Is what do I want? What's my monthly nut? Let's get that locked up. I'll feel so much better knowing that income's coming in. But then if I have more money, then I would love to be able to invest, hopefully grow that, and then I have some liquidity to maybe do extra things above the baseline.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the reality is that people do a mix of all the strategies, right? What's really happening. To your point, lots of people they want to know the lights are on the rest of their life, and that's a great feeling. And then they have permission to take more risk and do other things. And they can be more philanthropical. They can think about legacy, or they can just enjoy more lifestyle.
My grandfather is a great example of this. He was a teacher, and they have lived a phenomenal retirement. Not extravagant. They've been able to do so many things, be super generous, go to Florida each year, and I never asked what his income was, but I know it wasn't great.
Yeah. But
it just goes to show, like with the pension, because he got a true pension. Yeah. It's been unbelievable what they've been able to experience, and they're still in their mid 80s and living well and healthy. And so it's just one of those, I got to see firsthand the pension unlock intentional living. Yeah. And then you see other people that didn't have that option. They're just in a different headspace, especially if you compare incomes. So, yeah. Yeah. In
fact, there's some studies out there to suggest that people that live on the 4% rule never take out that much. And it's really just a question of, like you said, just having a scarcity mindset or just being fearful that a bad market term could take away too much. Right? Yeah. So those are the three options that are outlined in the book. And I think now we are at the time where we bring up some math.
Now's disclaimer time. 2 disclaimers. Number 1, if you're not a math person, it's been fun knowing you. Like and subscribe, and you can exit this channel or this video, because the rest is going to be meaty. It's tongue in cheek, because so many of you love diving into the numbers and you want to see this in real life. And so the disclaimer number 1 is we're getting into Excel, and it's going to be a lot of fun. But when we went through this, it's impossible to look at every different scenario. So Walter and I did our best, and I'm taking way too much credit with this. We did our best by saying, okay, what are the assumptions that we want to take? And so you'll show that. And then I just threw random examples. I did not even ask, like, what's an average 35? I just was like, okay, 25-year-old has this scenario, go. 35-year-old has this scenario. So what I'm not saying is take the concepts. It will be so unlikely that you'll fit into one of these buckets, but the concepts of it should be able to resonate regardless if you're young or old. You may be someone who helps people for a living like this. This is going to be a super valuable video. And then the other disclaimer is this is not investment advice, retirement advice, insurance advice. Like, this is for educational purposes only. And so pound sand if you want to send us a letter. How's that? How's that for a disclaimer? Okay. All right, cool. Anything else you want to say before we jump into the numbers?
I'll add my own disclaimer, which is that
people just skip this.
Yeah. But I think the idea is that we're doing Excel so that we could show a little more transparency about how numbers are created in financial planning software. So it doesn't have the robustness of financial planning software. In fact, anybody that contacts us about wanting to do an exercise, we would go through the normal financial planning software, because there's a lot more to financial planning and retirement planning than what we're going to show in Excel. But I think it's still very helpful.
I think it's super beautiful to simplify because we have access to all the same software that y'all are talking about, and it's great. You can give someone a 65-page report and all, but it's sometimes we hide behind complexity. I think there's something really beautiful about the average person. Let's democratize the ability to understand these concepts, and none of this stuff that you're going to see is going to be crazy rocket science. But I think what's valuable is actually putting in the work to put this, and I've taken too much credit. All I did was come up with the idea around this video, give you the scenarios, you did the rest. So without further ado, let's jump over.
All right. So let's start with our first example here. And so what I'm going to do is just go through the assumptions so that everybody kind of understands where we're coming from. And then we'll go through the idea. But I think first, Caleb, I want to do one quick introduction to a concept that I think will help with this, which is what I call the income efficiency test. So I'm going to ask you 4 questions, and you tell me whether it's a yes or no to you.
Okay.
Fair? All right.
Yes.
Yes or no, you would like to generate your retirement income using the fewest dollars possible.
True. Yes. True. Is it true or yes?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Yes.
The answer is yes.
Yes or no, you would like to generate your retirement income taking the least amount of risk possible.
Yes.
Okay. Yes or no, you would like to generate your retirement income with the most predictability possible.
Yes, I would choose more predictability
Than
versus less predictability.
Right.
Yes.
And finally, if possible, you would like to leave the best legacy possible.
Yes, of course.
Right. So the answer to those questions are all yes, but I would argue, and we'll come back to at the end to these questions again, that you cannot answer yes to these questions without some form of actuarial science. And what we're going to go through is just showing how actual science has an impact on retirement income and how it will help answer those questions to go from what you intuitively want to say yes to really what's going on in your world, right? So the challenge will be to understand your strategy, your retirement income plan, can it answer yes to those 4 questions, or does it have modified yeses, or maybe even flat out no's?
Can you break down actuarial science and what you mean by that?
Yeah, so actuarial science is the product that insurance companies put out there, right? So actuarial science really relies on pools of people to navigate risk, to be able to, for example, if I'm going to buy, if I buy a life insurance policy, the death benefit is the function of actuarial science, where we can all pool money in together and we all get a death benefit from it, so that we will never have to pay into the insurance company as much death benefit as we'll get back out, right? So the insurance company, actuarial science, is really a study of how long people will live so that they can begin to price how to make these policies work. In the ancient Roman times, there was such things as life insurance, right? And that's when people go to war, the towns would put money into a pot in case your husband didn't come back, right?
Jeez, yeah.
But the problem was there was no math to it. In fact, it was a gentleman named Mr. Halley's Comet, the guy that discovered Halley's Comet, is the one that actually discovered actuarial science, where he actually got hold of birth records and death records in an old European town, where he could begin the idea of understanding longevity. The other side of actual science comes in the form of the life benefits or pensions, right? Where we can all pool our dollars. The insurance company can pay us more than we can withdraw out because of the law of large numbers, right? And so if you think of how a pension works, a pension company will just say, okay, the average life expectancy might be age 83. And so I know I'm on the hook to pay you out to age 83. Well, we know lots of people will live beyond age 83. And the way they can keep paying those people is because they're subsidized by the people that die before, right? And so that kind of phenomenon only happens in the insurance world. And so when we add that service onto our portfolios, we see a change in how our retirement income.
Yeah, another way to say actuarial science is planning with longevity in mind. Mm-hmm. It's the tools that unlock when you start looking at longevity, because the 2 questions that you open this interview with is how long will you live, and how will your investments do? Right. Well, actuarial science doesn't really answer the how well your investments will do, but it can take major risk of how long you will live. Right. And that's one huge factor that a lot of people don't know the answer to. And if you don't know the answer to that, you have limited options. Right.
And if you think about what a pension does, which is the perfect blend of actual science, is it takes away the risk of longevity, and it takes away the risk of you having to invest. Right? They take that risk on. And because they have enough people in the pool, they can be pretty accurate with what they can pay out. Yeah. And we'll see here shortly that you can end up getting more income because of it.
Cool. All right.
Okay? All right. So let's start at the very beginning here. So we're going to start with a 25-year-old, someone who is just getting started in life. And I want people to see here what we did is just a couple of assumptions. So we're going to assume a stock portfolio can earn about 8%. We're going to assume a bond portfolio can earn about 4%, right? And so we're just going to...
for those of you in the comments that are saying that we should have done a better job, what we're essentially saying is we're giving the benefit of the doubt that your stock portfolio is never going to lose money, ever.
Right. We're just assuming it earns 8% per year.
8% a year.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, some years will it be higher?
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Some years could it be zero or
right.
negative? Yes. We're in this basic example, we're
yeah.
saying 8% is the assumption in your stock portfolio every single year. And then if for those of you that are doing bonds, 4%.
Right.
No,
because we got to project something.
Yes.
So we might as well use 8 and 4. And then something that's very popular in the 401k land is what's known as target date funds, right?
Yes.
And the idea behind target date funds is simply that they de-risk themselves over time. So as I get older, I reduce the exposure to the stock market and gain more safety in the bond market. And so we just kind of create our own, right? And so the way we did it is we said, all right, when I'm between 25 and 34, I'm 90% stock and 10% bonds. And I just dropped the exposure to stock 10% per decade until I get to maybe 50 or 60 years old, where maybe it's a 50-50 blend, or the classic 60-40 when I get to retirement, right? So that's the glide path that we're using, okay? In this particular scenario, we're assuming that the person is starting with no money at all. We're just starting from scratch.
Yeah, and we're starting with the 25-year-old.
25-year-old.
So we're going to go up from 35, 45, 50.
Mm-hmm.
Each scenario is going to have different. With the 25-year-old that I put on your plate, it was like, hey, it's realistic that they don't have any assets.
Right.
They're just starting to make money.
Right.
What would you do in this scenario?
Right, exactly right. And we're assuming that they can save $10,000 a year, okay? And we're assuming that through raises and inflation and things that they can increase that $10,000 savings by 3% a year, okay? And we're starting this whole exercise at age 25. So let's jump down here to the chart. And so what I want people to see is here we are starting at age 25. We have no beginning balance. We're contributing that $10,000. Here's the blended return between my stock portfolio, the bond portfolio, right? Those are the returns for an average return of 7.6%. And so at the end of that first year, I have $10,760. So that obviously becomes my starting balance. And I do repeat the same. Now notice that the $10,000 has grown to $10,300 because of that 3% inflator. I still have the same exposure here in the market, 7.6. I end up at 22,661. We'll notice that at some point we see this changing because I'm now working on the glide path where I'm getting closer and closer to that 50 portfolio, right? And so what I did here is just truncated this so we don't see obnoxious rows
every 5 years.
Yeah, so to
sense.
every 5 years. And so at the end of that period of time, this person will have $3.2 million in their retirement accounts. Okay, so nice job by them of saving that money over that period of time. So now we come back up here to the traditional planning, which says, all right, let's use a 4% rule as my rule of thumb of what I can take out. So 4% of that $3.2 million is $128,000 a year, right? And then from there, we adjust for inflation.
Do you know the average account balance at the end of, I'm over 3 million, way higher.
Way higher than the average person. It's probably closer to a couple 100,000 would be my guess if you did average.
So it's just one of those where some people could say that this is conservative, but over time we're showing even in this scenario, you have over $3 million, which is phenomenal.
Yeah, so $10,000 a year growing at those returns. And again, we're slowly adjusting the portfolio to being more and more conservative. Still gives us $3.2 million.
Okay, and at 4%, it's producing just shy of 130,000.
That's right.
Okay.
So that's our bogey there, okay? So now we're going to introduce this concept of purchasing life insurance policies for two different reasons, which we'll get into here in a second. Both consistent with the way the Wade Fowles and Sangers and Blanchetts and folks talk about and what's in my book. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to notice that everything up here is the same. Okay, we have the same returns, same target, the glide path, the same scenario starting with $0 and $10,000 contribution. The one big difference we're going to make is we're now paying $4,500 for a premium.
Okay.
At the age 60, 65, that will be worth $1 million in terms of death benefit.
Okay.
That's the big change. Here's in gold the same assumptions that we had before, right? We have that $128,000 in income, and that's what we're measuring to see, are we doing better or worse?
And is the life insurance replacing the bonds in this
over
scenario?
time? They will. We'll start you have that option to change your portfolio allocation.
So when you ran these numbers, did you did you have also a bond option here?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. So
yeah. So what I did is I switched when you bought the life insurance policy. I made it so that you stayed more in the equity exposure.
Okay, because
the
life
cash
insurance
value becomes your bond.
Okay, great.
Right.
Okay, I'm glad you did that. I was
Yeah.
just asking, clarifying.
Yeah. So here we have the idea of the fifth option, the beat the bear approach, right? And so remember we talked about having 4 years of cash value equal to salary in the cash value that unlocks a better withdrawal rate, right? And so here we said, all right, for 4 years, that means I have to have $515,000 of cash value, okay, which we end up having at age 65. So now I have the ability to take out a 6% withdrawal rate instead of 4. And if I take out 6%, I can enjoy a retirement income of $143,000.
Do you want to show the spreadsheet?
Sure.
Just so that we can see what the difference is?
Yeah. So here we have the beginning balance. Now notice our contribution fell from 10,000 to 5,500.
Yes.
And some people are going to be like, wait a minute, that's going to mean a much lower account value in the end. And that may be true.
Yeah. And I also see that your portfolio returns at 8% because the life insurance is replacing the bonds.
Right.
Okay.
So we can be a little more aggressive. Now, in fairness, we can, this is something that everybody will change based on risk tolerance. But I said, all right, at the basic level, I can be just more aggressive because I have a safe asset that's growing alongside
that's
of
a bond alternative.
Yeah. Okay. And so we can see here that I have an ending portfolio of 2.388, far lower than the 3.2 million.
Yes, and when you combine that with the life insurance, you
cash
have
value here. I have 2.9.
Whereas what was just the portfolio
was
without the insurance?
2.38.
Well, no, sorry.
That was
the investment only
was 3.2.
Okay, so if someone straight up just cares about net worth, the investment only beats the life insurance.
That's right.
In your scenario.
Right. Which is why I bring up the idea behind personal finance and corporate finance. Right. So personal finance is worried about my balance sheet. Corporate finance is worried about cash flow.
Right.
And so at the end of the day, we're going to see that I could have a smaller balance sheet and better cash flow.
Yes.
Right. And I would argue that's the person who wins.
Well, and I would also argue that when it comes to planning, you have to look at scenario, like what could go wrong in each scenario. And, life insurance gives you lots of other off-road, even pre-retirement that we don't have to get into in this video. But in this scenario, you have 2.3, just under 2.4 million.
Yep.
I'm assuming that the 6% that you're referencing above is just off of the equities.
Correct.
Okay,
Just
we're not even
touching that. Right.
We're not currently touching the almost $600,000 of cash value that will grow every year.
Correct.
From there. Okay.
Because that's in reserve for the negative years.
I understand.
Right.
Okay.
And so we have a total asset base of just under 3.
Okay, so you have less money, but let's see how that less money, we just, spoiler alert, but you showed that in the beat the bear scenario that you actually 6% of a smaller portfolio produce more income than the 4% of a bigger portfolio.
That's right. And like you said, I have all the benefits of life insurance along the way that I wouldn't have in a portfolio that just had the stock portfolio, right? So what's interesting then is to say, well, if I wanted my 4%, if I wanted to stay at the 4% strategy, meaning I just want to be in the markets, then I would actually need $3.5 million to be able to replicate the same income that we took out with the 6%. The problem is I don't got it.
Yeah.
Right. I'm short by 357. So I have to either take more risk, put more money in, right? But what I'm saying is I'm becoming less efficient if I want to go that route. So in short, what we're saying is the 6% withdrawal rate feels like I have 357,000 more.
Yes.
Because I don't need it to equate the same income.
And I know that the 6% is factoring in, you can be more aggressive because you have liquidity. But if you go back to this, the 6% is also not utilizing all the capital. Like I get that the cash value is unlocking your ability to earn 6%, but it's also just cool that it's true buckets that your dollars are doing different jobs versus it all in one bucket.
Right.
So,
the 6% is purely on the portfolio money, right? Creating that 143. There's another 600,000 that sits there to support the 6%, right?
So it's part of the equation.
Right, but it has a different job to do.
It has a different job.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then the second conversation that we've had was pension 2.0, right? And so today, at certain ages, you can get a distribution rate of 8%. Okay. And so we intuitively know that if I can get an 8% distribution versus 4, I'm going to be in better shape. And so to prove that, we just said, well, what if I wanted to maintain that 4% income level of $128,000? How many dollars would it take to purchase this annuity to accomplish that. Turns out it's about 1.6 million. Well, what's magical about that is it means I have $1.3 million that is not needed to generate the same retirement income as the 4% rule. Okay, now let's take a couple lessons from this. The first one is to understand what accessible money means versus liquidity money. So people will always get weirded out by annuities because of their lack of liquidity, or even if we choose certain annuities where we actually gift the money to the insurance company and never see it again, right? And so people feel worried about the fact that they've lost those dollars. And so they want to keep their money locked up in the brokerage world and use the 4% rule. Well, money in the 4% rule is accessible. I can access it. I can go take money in and out of it because it's fully under my control. But Caleb, let me ask this question. If I have $1 million and it generates my $40,000 that I need, if I have a long-term care event or an emergency and I take money out of that $1 million, what happens to my income?
My income's going to get affected for the worse.
It goes down, right? So the money is accessible to me, but it's not really liquid.
Because it's all locked up for the job, which is income.
And so when I change the mindset and say, okay, there's lots of different annuity options, which we won't get in today. But if I even took the most severe one and said, I'm going to give this money to the insurance company in exchange for a pension, I only had to yield 1.6 million, which means 1.3 has no job. It's true liquidity.
Yes.
Right. That's key, is that I actually have 1.3 million that I could give to charities, to my kids, or add on to my lifestyle.
Yeah. And by the way, as the market or whatever it's invested goes up and down, that number will hopefully increase over time as well. Right. So just again, like, I know, who cares what my opinion is, but like Pension 2.0 makes a ton of sense. And I gravitate towards that even as a entrepreneur, to be like, if I could figure out what the baseline is, lock that up with as few dollars as possible. It's only possible if I have a permanent life insurance death benefit, giving me the ability to, because this can be more risky, because if you die immediately, like, that's a horrible trade. Yeah. But if I have that permission slip that I can be able to do that, then I feel like I get best of both worlds. But I like the beat the bear strategy as well, because you're doing a similar concept. We're limited. It's not as powerful from a number standpoint.
Well, you're more market focused.
But you're more market focused.
You're comfortable with the markets, and you have to take what the market gives you.
Yes.
Right.
So I just want to reframe this conversation again. We took a 25-year-old that had zero assets, that's starting to save $10,000 a year and increase at 3%. If they just put their money into a basic target date fund, we showed that they would have over $3 million at the age of retirement. Everyone would be like, "That's a great job, awesome." At 4%, it's able to produce $128,000, and we showed that if they put starting premium of what was our life insurance?
We did the premium of $4,500.
$4,500. So early on, they have less money going to equities. So everyone's freaking out. 25 years old, you're putting money into whole life insurance, and I bet you the way that you designed that wasn't crazy max funded. It was probably just a typical life insurance policy. Everyone's freaking out. And then we showed that over time that more income can be created in that scenario. And it unlocks a Pension 2.0 strategy that is just not on the table to its fullest extent if you didn't have that permanent life insurance.
Right. Yeah, we probably should cover that a little bit better, the idea of the death benefit.
Yeah.
Which is, we go back to the pension max conversation, right? There's 4 outcomes with a pension. There's 4 outcomes. So outcome number 1, the pensioner outlives the spouse. So if the pensioner outlives the spouse, he would really rather have had the life-only option.
Correct.
Right. The second option is the spouse outlives the pensioner, in which case then we better have had some sort of joint payout, right? The third option is they both live a long time. If they both live a long time, they probably wish they had the life-only option, right? And then the fourth option is they both die early, in which case they would have rather have had the life-only option too, right? So there's 3 scenarios where the life option was the best outcome, right? And so, but we have to guard against the one potential outcome. And so the way we got around Pension Max was we had a life insurance policy that would protect the spouse, right? And so when we designed Pension 2.0, it's the same concept.
When you say protect the spouse, you're saying that if I have the life only and I die prematurely, my death benefit goes to
the
my spouse, who then can do whatever they want with
the
that
money.
income.
Right. So I never disinherit.
Yes. So
my
it
spouse.
gives me the ability. Tom Wall uses an example, a baseball example. If you're pitching and there's no relievers, you're going to be very conservative.
Right.
If you know that you have relievers back, you can throw as hard as possible.
That's exactly right.
It's the same concept of just like you're able to get more income now, and also know that you're not making a selfish decision that's going to hurt your spouse.
I think it's an elegant solution because I have more income, and then my spouse or my family will get all the money I spent back, right? And so the idea behind Pension 2.0 is the death benefit functions like Pension Max, where I can now choose a more aggressive annuity because I know that the money's coming back to the family. So even though I feel like I lost liquidity, it's temporary.
You know, my confession was I thought the 25-year-old, my scenario I gave you, that life insurance wasn't going to be, the life insurance option wasn't necessarily going to be that much better.
Yeah.
And then we were going to have to go into, okay, even if it was about the same, what list off all the benefits of life insurance kind of deal.
Yeah.
And it's just funny to me that, that will be another video. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you don't if you want to learn more. But it's just funny to me that life insurance in our scenario actually beats it, whereas my prediction was it wasn't going to, but I would still choose the life insurance option
because of its benefits,
because of all the benefits that your spreadsheet doesn't break down.
Doesn't even talk about. Okay. Right. Yeah. And the idea is the right proportion, right?
Yes.
We could, if we did more than 4,500, it wouldn't work. And also in full disclosure, we increased the risk of the portfolio they had because they have this life insurance cash value that's stable, right? So if we kept the same target glide path, it probably wouldn't have come out as well. Right,
but then why would you, if life insurance is your bond alternative, why would you also then?
Yes, it makes sense. You would change the risk profile.
Yeah, and so let's move on to age 35. Do you want to go through the comparison?
We can go through the comparison real quickly here, which is basically taking a look at here. This in blue here, we noticed that the withdrawal rate improvement was 2% from 4 to 6. Better income, right? This is the amount of dollars that I would need in my 4% rule to come up with. So we had an efficiency gain of $357,000. And then just over here, 14 doesn't sound like a lot, but if I have a 30-year horizon, that's an extra $500,000 of income. And then I ran one at 7%, right, 6, just to see what that would look like. That was $1.1 million extra. That's a whole lot of money left on the table. And I think what would happen is you lend it past those to your kids, right, instead of consuming them yourself.
Yeah.
And so that's what's at stake in terms of a 4% versus the beat the bear approach. The Pension 2.0, we have a 4% improvement, right, in terms of and so we just solved for what would it take to equal the 4% rule, and understanding that took $1.6 million. And so we actually freed up $1.3 million. That's the efficiency gain we got there. And then if we want to look at what's interesting here is, here's that traditional balance, it was $3.2 million. Here's the portfolio with the insurance. It's only 2.9, right? So we have a $250,000 discrepancy here. Balance sheet versus cash flow, right? We want the strategy to give us the best cash flow. We're not, I kind of joke that balance sheets like beach muscles, right? They're fun to look at, but they don't do anything for you, right?
If we did an on the street interview and we asked, what scenario would you rather have? Traditional or the fifth option? I would bet you that almost everyone would choose the 3.2 million.
Of course.
Why not?
Right.
I would, if I didn't have any more context, I would choose a higher number. Right. And this is a classic example of a lot of people making content on the internet. It's like it's so easy to say. Yeah. It's so easy to have that. But then if you showed the income, which income would you rather have?
Right. Yes.
It would be the exact opposite.
Yeah.
And then if you ask people, what do you care more about?
Right.
This or this? Yes. That would be an interesting experience.
That would be a good poll.
We might have to bring you back to Broadway when it's a little warmer.
Yeah, that's right.
We'll go to Broadway and do those drunk interviews where we'll
yeah, and that's why we have the Copernicus story at the beginning, which is we all thought the sun revolved around the Earth, which is the 3.2 million. And at some point, some smart guy says, no, I think it's the opposite way, right? And you can credit the academicians the academics that came up with the story, right? So even if I'm short $247,000, I still have better income. The other part that's interesting to look at is that with the traditional, this is the stock portfolio, right? We start at 90% and it starts to go down 10% per year. And at the end, I'm at 60%. But what's interesting about the potential for the fifth option is, yes, I start with a lesser mix. I have more money that's, in total, the portfolio is not as aggressive as the 90%, but it's growing over time to the point when I get to retirement, it's actually 80% now is in the market and 20% is in the cash value, right? So, and again, we could change that to be whatever your glide
Totally.
path potential is, but we have the ability to retain a little bit more risk because my income has that higher level of safety.
It's almost like you're starting to build a foundation, and then you're able to build more aggressively once the foundation's built, versus the starting with your highest exposure to the market, because we've been told when you're young you can take risks, blah 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 blah, but then later you're ratcheting that down. And so I would imagine if we pump this to age 85, our numbers would even be more dramatic because of the fifth option. I would imagine would shine.
Yeah, and I think if we just go to just traditional portfolio management, we know that the market over long periods of time is the best growth vehicle.
Yes.
Right. We layer in bonds just so that we can have some volatility control and just keep us sane because of the ups and downs. And as we get closer to retirement, we just want to have a little less risk off the table. But if I didn't need the income ever, and my portfolio horizon was indefinite, I would probably take more risk, right? Because we know in the long run, that's what pays off, right? And that's what this income allows us to do, is it takes having to take money out of the markets as frequently off the table, right? And so therefore I can have a different trajectory.
Love it.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to age 35.
Let's go to 35.
Most people have no idea where to start or how to really evaluate whole life insurance. That's why we've built The Vault. It's all of our best life insurance resources and educational tools all in one place, all for free. We have calculators, handbooks, crash course, deep dive videos on numbers. If you want to learn more, click the link in the description or tag comment below to unlock The Vault. All right, back to the video.
All right, Caleb, you gave me a scenario for a 35-year-old. So let's review the 35-year-old in very much the same fashion and see what the results look like. So we have the same returns for the stock and bond, 8 and 4%. We have the same target date glide path. Now, the scenario here is a little bit different. Now we're starting with $250,000 and an increased saving capacity to $15,000, the same 3% inflation, and we're starting at age 35 now. So let's take a look at what the chart looks like. So we start with our 250, just like we did in the first one, right? We add our contribution, but notice now that we're a little bit older, so that blend now drops to 7.2%, right? And at the end of that first year, we have $284,000, which becomes the beginning balance for the next year. Notice again that the $15,000 is increased by 3%, and then notice over time that the blended return goes down as the glide path adjusts. And so at the end of this period of time, we have a whopping $4 million.
Hey, let's go! Congrats!
Right? Yeah.
$4 million.
That's pretty good. That's a pretty good deal, right? And so now let's go back up. So that's the starting point. So now we have our 4% rule. Okay,
Yep.
and so you can see that we have an income of $161,000 at that point in time. That'd be our starting. We could adjust that for inflation, and away we go with the 4% rule. So now let's go and apply the strategies that we did before with the life insurance. We have all the same stuff at the beginning, the 250, the 15,000, but now the difference is we're going to have 8,500 as the premium.
It's more than half of the initial savings capacity.
Very counterintuitive, isn't it?
Yes.
Right. And so we have $1 million of death benefit at age 65. The gold is our reminder of what the 4% rule looked like, right? We have 4% gave us this $161,000. It required $4 million, which is what we had in order to generate that $161,000. Okay?
And that you use the word bogey a lot, because this is the thing that needs, like, this is the standard.
Right.
This is what
we got to do better than this. Otherwise, we live on the 4% rule.
Yes, that's
right?
correct.
Okay. So let's go to the chart and see what this looks like. So now something really interesting happens in this scenario. I don't know if you threw me a curveball or not.
No, I
know,
randomly picked numbers.
This one took a while for me to get my head around. But so let's take a look at this. So we start with 250, right?
Yes.
And then we're only contributing 6,500 because the rest of it's going to premium, right? And so at the end, but again, we were able to adjust our risk profile because we're going to be gradually adding a safe asset to the equation, so that we kind of keep, we want to keep them more aggressive because we have the safe asset growing, right? So we're using 8% as the growth of the dollars that are in the portfolio. So at the end of that first year, we have $277,000. That becomes the beginning balance for the next year, where our contribution goes up by the 3%, and we just do this over and over again. And what's interesting is when we add the cash value, this person actually has more money than the prior example.
Which you're going to have some people in the comments say they actually believe that. The people that actually put money into whole life will have more because of all the things, but you've been pretty clear that that's not a pitch that you use.
No, and it's very rare.
It's very rare in spreadsheets, but potentially in real life it could happen.
Yeah.
And so you have more money in the life. This number is gonna blow everything because you have the fifth option and you have more money at the end of the day.
Right. And so it took me a while to figure out what was going on here. And the reality is this: because I increased my risk profile throughout that that years of accumulation, I was able to get bigger and compounding returns on the portfolio than I would with the glide path.
Yeah.
Right. So the glide path is reducing the risk over time. This one's holding it at a fairly aggressive, stock portfolio all the way through.
You're saying instead of doing the target date fund, because we're putting money into life insurance with the end in mind, you're able to put more money in equities
and keep it
knowing that you're going to have a healthy balance.
Right. Exactly right. In fact, I got so guilty that this was so good, I went ahead and decided, well, maybe we should just model, and I just kind of put a little plug out here that what if we just did 7.5%, right?
That's fair.
And said, okay, we weren't quite as aggressive, right? And at that point, you can see that it changes it fairly dramatically down to 4 million. In which case now,
so you're saying instead of getting 5, so just to be clear, we're not showing true apples to apples. You're intentionally putting a 0.5% friction point or drag on the life insurance side because you don't want that all to cloud the judgment of the concept.
You could go to 8%, but reducing it by 0.5 percentage point,
I'm fair with that.
Put it equal with what the other
I'm fair with
other
that.
scenario was, right?
Cool.
So now these are about the same.
I just want to clarify that.
Yeah. Notice that the first one with the glide path is 4.04, and here we're at 4.059, so slightly more. But and I took a little bit less risk at that 8%.
Over a little bit.
Sorry about that.
Sorry. Okay. Yeah.
All right. So now we go to the game, right? Which is, okay, I need 4 years of cash value, of income in the cash value, and that equals $646,000. As we mentioned before, when I cross that 4 years of cash value in a safe, non-correlated fund, I could take out 6% now, right? And so here's the 6%. 6% of that 4.059 number is $205,000, which is $43,000 more than the 4% rule. Okay?
That's
so now we're moving in the right direction here, aren't we? And so again, the question I wanted to know was, well, how many dollars would I need to have to get that same $205,000 at the 4% rule? Turns out I need 5.1 million, and I'm short by $1,097,000.
Yeah.
So I'm getting the benefit of a withdrawal rate on a portfolio that's substantially less. Right? That's the efficiency gain. It's like I have a $5 million portfolio in terms of what I'm taking.
Yeah.
Right. That's the efficiency gain of the beat the bear approach. So now let's move down to pension 2.0, which is, okay, let's assume I want to equal the $161,000 of income. Well, how many dollars would I have to contribute? About $2 million, which means I have $2 million left over to do anything else I might want to do.
Yep. Can I play devil's advocate with you a little bit? You may, in this scenario, we're not going to make you run this on the spot, but you may want more life insurance than just $1 million death benefit if we are having $2 million go into the annuity option.
Right.
So that's the devil's advocate here is there's no perfect scenario, and I think you were doing but if we had to rerun this because you purposely gave yourself a bump down, we potentially could have even increased the premium even more if we wanted extreme, and still got the same result.
Right.
So I actually think you being conservative was helpful because if we had to rerun this scenario, I would say, what if we put in 10 grand into a premium or something just to see what the death benefit option was. So this is fascinating. Yeah,
there's other iterations here, and your point's well taken, which is if I give $2 million and I die the next day, there's a risk that maybe I gave that money away.
Right.
Now, it depends on the annuity I choose.
Half of it's covered.
Right.
Yeah.
It depends on the annuity I choose. Right. Because there could be some annuities where I get money back, in which case I don't need the death benefit as much. But your point's well taken, which is we kind of split the road on this one a little bit, saying, okay, let's just see what happens. And you're right. We might have a $2 million death benefit to be crystally
this is like the 25-year-old was marginally better. This one is, maybe it was the scenario I gave you because a 35-year-old, not every 35-year-old has 250,000, but maybe the people watching this channel are. I didn't want to just run averages because that can be depressing. I want to be like, okay, what's above average? What would that look like? And this is pretty remarkable.
Yeah. And what it's doing is we have an account value that can compound, right? So we didn't start at zero,
Yes.
where every dollar, we needed more dollars to get the asset base
Yes.
to use for either of the strategies. Here we had enough of an asset base head start that it could grow over time to be
And I just want to
meaningful.
remind you, and I'll say this for every time, not only does the fifth option give you way more income, less risk, but there's so many other benefits of insurance that's not even showing
We
up
haven't even
here.
talked about it, yeah.
We're not, and the people that get the life insurance aspect, I hope that this is great. And if you don't understand what we're talking about, I would encourage you to lean in. If you want to talk to someone on our team, if you want to even have Walter take a look at your situation, like that's the benefit of me being connected in this space. Like we're doing some cool collaborations. We'll have links down below, but also like a lot more content, because I would heavily encourage you to lean into something like this because it's really powerful.
All right, so now let's go to the comparison. And as we saw before, when we have the 6% withdrawal rate, that's better than the 4% by 2%, and that increased our income by $43,000. So what I did is I just said, well, what does $43,000 over 30 years look like? Well, that's $1.3 million of extra income. And then like the one before, I ran it at 7%. And the 7% gave us a $78,000 improvement. That over 3 years is almost $2.3 million.
Real dollars.
Right. So those are some substantial improvements. Again, these are dollars that would be earmarked for our legacy because we wouldn't be spending it. Right. We'd be stuck at the 4% rule, trying to make sure we don't run out of money. Then at the pension 2.0 scenario, we know we have an improvement of 4%, right, from the 8% minus the 4% withdrawal rate, which if we want to have the same $161,000 of income would require $2 million, and that freed up $2,039 that are not required for income generation and can be used for anything else.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this summary is just another great way for us to just repeat what we're saying as we're going through the spreadsheet, and it's very eye-opening. I wonder if age 45 is going to be the same trend, because I definitely think the 35-year-olds, like the fifth option is almost an unfair advantage, especially when you start looking at the other benefits they get throughout their life from a standpoint of what the fifth option gives you 6 or 7 or 8 options as you're accumulating as well, but we're not even including. And so let's go to age 45.
Yeah, good. All right.
Now we're rolling up our sleeves.
Now we're getting through this thing. Okay, so let's review. With the 45-year-old, as we noticed, we have the same returns, the 8 and the 4, the same glide path, right? Are working our way down towards retirement. The difference here is we're going to start with $500,000, right? At the 45-year-old.
You think that's fair? That's probably generous.
That's a good number, but there are people that do that, right? And so what's interesting is just seeing the relative changes that that come about based on different asset classes and lengths of time that you have until you retire, right? There's just different answers.
The beautiful thing is, regardless if you have more than that or less than that, it's the concept that we're leaning into. We're not saying like, oh, it's the concept, and so we have to come up with
proportional, right? It's all
some kind of number. Okay.
Yeah. So we start with $500,000 there, saving capacity of $25,000, increasing by 3%. Our starting age is 45, and so then let's go look at the math. So here we have $500,000. And we add our 25,000 to it. Now notice we're at a lower return because I'm 45 now. I'm starting the glide path, right? Getting closer to retirement. That ends me at that about 560,000. 560,000 is my beginning balance. Notice that my 25,000 has gone up.
And Walter, I'll just say this. A comment could be made that people are attacking how we're doing the whole stocks and bonds thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the pushback I would have to that is whatever numbers you want to use, we also have to factor that in on the fifth option. Yeah. And so there's some people that might be like, you're way too conservative in some areas. And I just want to try to like think ahead of where people could push back.
Mm-hmm.
We tried to do our best. When I say we, I'm giving myself too much credit. You tried to do your best to try to look at the situation and pick something. Yeah. But that is one thing that will be interesting to see people's take, and we would love to hear from you. Like, what would you have done different if you disagree with the way that we're going about it?
Yeah. And honestly, if people have target date funds, it's not probably too far off that they're reducing their risk over time. Yeah. And people may do that themselves if they're younger and start to move towards safer portfolios. But you're right. If we want to be more aggressive, we'll just have more dollars right at the end, which is great for everybody, right?
Great for everyone.
A bigger balance sheet means better income. especially when we add the efficiency equations to it.
Yes.
So, all right. So as we do this math, we end up coming up to about 3.3 million. And so as you noticed, the one thing that's important about this is it is less than the 35-year-olds.
Yeah.
Even though they started with more money and saved more money, we realize the value of those 10 extra years of compounding.
Yes.
So as we get older, compounding becomes less of a function because of our age, right? We just don't have the time. That 10 years could equate to almost a double in terms of the market. So a person with $500,000 here would end up with about $3.3 million. So let's go back through the math like we always do. So we have our 4% rule, and if we apply that to that account value or account balance, we got about $133,000 of income. That's our bogey, right?
Yes. Yes.
All right. So now let's now move into the insurance side of the equation. And so here we have the same scenarios up top, right? $500,000 to $25,000 a year in savings capacity. Now we're looking at a $16,000 premium.
Okay. So that's a big
big
chunk.
jump, right? It's a big chunk of it, right? Which gets us also $1 million of death benefit. In gold, we're going to review the 4% rule. We have the 4% here that reminded us that we got $133,000 of income from the $3.3 million. So let's go to the spreadsheet and take a look at the results here. We start with $500,000.
Okay.
Only $9,000 is going into the savings.
And you're also doing 7.8% versus 8%.
And I also decided to handicap ourselves.
Walter, you're killing me, man.
By saying that we only are going to, instead of doing the full 8% that you can, or that maybe some people will want to do, is I only said 7.5%, right? And at that point,
comment Walter's no fun if you agree with me right now that he's no.
And so at the end of that period of time, we have 3.3 million, almost the same.
Okay.
Right? So we really came up with about the same.
I just want to see what's happening. So the balance we're going in the portfolio, you're just earning 7.5, and then obviously instead of having 15,000 25,000 originally, you're starting with 9, and then you're able to contribute more.
And then just ignore these here. I put the cash value at the end just to save some time.
Okay. So you have 564,000 in cash value and 2.7
in the portfolio.
Which is equaling 3.3. Okay.
Which is virtually identical.
So we're taking 6% of that 2.7 million.
Correct. Okay. We're never going to take 6% out with the cash value. That cash value is there to allow us to take the 6% out.
I hear you.
Yeah. And so when we go back to the math or the numbers now, the results, we take a look at, all right, here we have the 4 years we talked about.
Shift over a little bit.
We have the $534,000 of cash value available, which unlocks the 6% withdrawal rate, which now means that we could take out $165,000, which is a $31,000 improvement from before. Okay. Now, just out of curiosity, how many dollars would I need at the 4% rule to get that $165,000? Well, it would be 4.1 million, and I'm short 796.
Just under $800,000.
Right. Yeah. So the efficiency gain is the 6% is like I have $4.1 million at the 4%.
I also want to just note in this scenario, we're not taking in more risk. In the beat the bear analogy, and 31,000, it's not like crazy. That's like a big enough number where a $31,000 difference adds up. And I'm sure when we look at the comparison over time, that adds up pretty substantially.
Right.
It's just one of those.
And one other common objection we haven't addressed today that we might as well just bring up is people will say, well, the 4% rule has an inflation ladder to it. Right.
Okay. Yes.
And so we can take a look at just understanding that if I have more income at the beginning of this, then I can invest that money for future income.
Yes.
Or I can enjoy just more money while I'm younger and in my more active years in retirement, right? So I understand at some point the 4% rule will encroach upon perhaps the $30,000, but not for years.
Yeah. Does the 6%, the beat the bears analogy, adjust for inflation at all?
Yeah, because we're taking out 6% and we can adjust that inflation too.
Okay.
So it should be apples to apples, but lots of times, especially when we get to the annuity that has more of a fixed income to it, people will start talking about what about the inflation.
Yep.
Right? So let's take a peek at the pension 2.0, right? We know we have the 8%, and so the question is, how much money do I need to get to that $133,000 at 8%? And that becomes $1.6 million, right? So importantly, as we talked about before, that allows me to have $1.6 million that has no income responsibility.
Going back to your question, if you would want to lock up as few dollars as possible to hit the income requirement, you're in this scenario. If they did pension 2.0, they would have $1.6 million to grow, to use, to pass on, to invest, to give. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So that's the efficiency there. So we go to our comparison as we've done before. We understand that the 6% is 2% better than the 4% rule. We have an improvement of 31,000. To your point, what is 31,000 over 30 years? Just about $1 million, right? And so now we do the 8% here. We have this 4% improvement. We only need $1.6 million to create that same level of income, and I have $1.6 million that I don't require. As we take a look here, we can understand that I start off with a stock portfolio, and then it's going to gradually decrease, and eventually my portfolio mix is going to get to the point where it has maybe a riskier profile to it because I have those safe assets.
Yes, I love it. So a call to action as people are watching this. Obviously, I hope that this is helpful. I want to get to age 55 here in a second, but for those of you that want to learn more, maybe want us to take a look at your situation, there will be a link down below. If you want Walter to take a look at your situation, or he's done a phenomenal job training our team, I would encourage you to take a look at the link below. And Walter, is there anything else that you would want to say as we're just going through that? Anything that you've not mentioned, or any common questions that come up when people talk to you, because you do this day in and day out for people?
I mean, the biggest is the learning curve of the philosophy.
Yes.
Right. Because it's counterintuitive, because we're so trained for balance sheet thinking that if I have a few dollars less than what I would have in a normal investment, that means I should be better off. But we're solving for cash flow, right? We're trying to be as efficient as we can. And then also, I think what's really important for us to understand is that true liquidity is really important. We could really fall asleep at night thinking we have all this money at the 4% rule, but we're just one life tragedy away from having to take money out of that account, and suddenly our income has gone down irrevocably as well. So having that extra money, that true liquidity, really allows life to be a lot smoother when either opportunities or bumps in the road happen.
I love that. Transition to age 55. And candidly, this is where a lot of people are coming to you with.
We've helped people unlock millions of dollars in hidden value just by reviewing their old life insurance policies. Unfortunately, thousands of people do not have life insurance policies set up properly, which could be costing them a lot of money. If you have a policy, the few minutes it takes to fill out our form could be the difference between continuing to waste money or unlocking serious value. If you qualify, we'll review your policy 100% for free and give you the honest breakdown you deserve. Click the link in the description or take comment below to apply. Back to the video.
There's a lot of people at 55 who are starting to think about retirement more seriously than maybe they should have earlier, but a very popular group to be working with.
The reason why I asked about 25, 35, and 45 was another way to say that is someone age 35 is probably not doing income projections, but there may be a need for permanent life insurance, and I don't want them to feel like this is a total ripoff. Like, we want to show that someone 25, 35, 45, there's not just a need, but there's an argument to be made that it could help you crazy when it comes to efficiency.
Right.
But the reality is, majority of them are not thinking about retirement income. They are thinking about accumulation.
Right.
At age 55, though, this is where lots of people start shifting their mentality, and they're starting to think more retirement income. And I would imagine a lot of the people that come to you are in their 50s and 60s.
Yeah, exactly right. It's a very popular demographic. It's like, looking at your side of your mirror and it says objects are closer than they appear. Like, retirement's coming. And you've lost really the power of compounding at this point, right? You've got 10 years of growth before age 65. And so it just requires a lot different thinking.
I would imagine the thinking goes where you're looking at what you have and you're saying, how can I be efficient?
Yeah.
And that can be depressing for some people, because some people are at age 55 and have nothing.
That's right.
That can be frustrating. Well, we're speaking this, just for the record, we're not speaking to the 80%, I just made that up, but the 80% or more that are just don't have any money or have very little money. We are talking to the person that has money, and now we're showing them ways to think about, it's a first world problem. It's like, how do you solve the retirement problem, which is like in other parts of the country, they would think that we're blessed beyond blessed, and that's the perspective. So,
and I think what you're going to see here with this 55 is it's more modest than you think, right? I mean, in terms of the income projections, right? So none of the income projections are over the top.
No, that's
right. So we're not talking hundreds of thousands of income in retirement.
And I also at the time of this recording, this was after a pretty public lawsuit when it comes to life insurance. One of the things that we have not done at all in this video is shown tax-free cash flow coming from life insurance.
Right.
We're not doing that at all. In fact, we're using whole life insurance. We're not even focused on like the max fund. Like the point I'm trying to make is we are being very conservative in how we're approaching this, and the people that get themselves in trouble it's because they're leveraging or leaning on life insurance as like the sole bucket.
Right.
And it's very risky the more you unpack.
Yeah.
And or it'll just underperform, but we're using it integrated in someone's current financial.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this at the beginning, which is we're using insurance for the actuarial value, right? Which is the death benefit and lifetime income, which is where they shine, right? So you're absolutely right. We're not looking at withdrawing money out of cash value, which is less efficient than using the annuities, which is why it works so well, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Great. So let's go 55, right?
Yes, sir.
Let's revisit. At the top, we have the stock portfolio earning an 8 and a 4. We have the glide path. Notice now we're going to be in that 55-year-old, so we're going to be at a little bit lower stock to bond ratio, right, in terms of the exposure. You gave me the mandate of $1 million, right? Someone at 55 at $1 million, right? Yeah, and that they can save $35,000 a year. This is telling me maybe their first couple of kids are out of college and they finally got themselves a raise. And so we're going to grow that by 3%. So we start at the beginning. We have $1 million. We're adding $35,000 to the portfolio. We have a slightly reduced return because of our allocation. That gives us a $1.1 million at the end of the first year. That becomes our second year starting balance, and we begin that process. At the end of that 10th year, we have about $2.6 million. Okay, so really, if you think about the rule of 72, we had one 10-year period to double, right? Which is basically what we did, right? It's 2.6 because we had the contributions.
Yes.
All right, so now we go back up and say, all right, if I have that money at 4%, that's going to give me $104,000 income, right? Okay. So I have $1 million at age 55. I'm going to add $35,000 to it, and at the age of 65,
a year,
I'm going to have $100,000 of income. Right. So again, more modest than you might think, right?
Yeah.
$1 million is a lot of money. Growing to 2.6 is a lot of money, but it's really only yielding the $104,000.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
So let's turn our attention to the insurance side of the equation, and go up here and review these inputs. Same inputs at the top. Now, here's what I wanted to do in this one. I wanted to put all of the money that they can save into
controversial,
insurance, right? All of it, right?
Now,
all of it.
Now you're getting some fans in the comments.
Yeah.
Wow, you're pushing it.
So we're saying, look, I got $35,000. The reason I'm thinking about this is because I don't have that much compounding time.
Yes.
Right. And so what I really need is to build up that actuarial science of the equation, because I'm starting at zero.
Yes.
And I only got 10 years to get it going. Right. So let's just see what happens when I put $35,000 into an insurance policy. It buys me $1 million death benefit at age 65. So let's take a look at the numbers here. So here we have our $1 million, no contribution.
Walter, you did the 7.5 again.
I reduced, I didn't do the 8%. I did 7.5%. And so at the end of that period of time, we have a total value of 2.2, and then we have the cash value that gets us to the 2.6, right? Okay. So we're right, really close to where we would have been in terms of the other option, because again, we took a little more risk because we're building a safe asset, right? And so when we go back up here, we take a look at what does that do for us? Well, I need $419,000 for cash value. So I have 4 years of income stored up. When I have 4 years of income stored up, that unlocks the 6% withdrawal rate potential, which gets me $132,000 or an improvement of $28,000, right? Again, I was curious, how much money would I need to make the 4% rule work at 132? I would need $3.32 million, and I would be short by $703,000. So the efficiency gain is that I'm getting an income that would be like if I was able to save more money in the 4% rule that I don't have. Okay. Then we look at the 8% option, the annuity here. So we know we have an 8% distribution rate, and if I want to match that $104,000 of income, I would need $1.3 million, right, to contribute to the income. And again, that allows me to have $1.3 million that does not have income responsibility and can go towards anything.
And that's a real. This is like real life. I mean, this is not someone that. This is a made up numbers, but this is a real scenarios.
This is a very common number.
Very common number.
Lots of people with $1 million in their 401ks as they get closer to retirement, and it's not going to spend as much as they think.
And if you were able, just looking at Pension 2.0, it was either like tie up all your money and produce that, or in this scenario, tie up about half, produce that, and have 1.3 million more. And we didn't even in this video talk about legacy.
Right.
We didn't even talk about legacy. It's funny. It's like we're because you can, and some people do this, they get so complicated
Uh-huh.
where it's all, people get lost, but we're not even adding in the legacy component, which the life insurance aspect has advantages. Having a permanent death benefit, it's just added to this whole thing. We're not including that into the cash value numbers, but though the death benefit helps you do a strategy like that.
Yeah, there is a column at the very end which we didn't even talk about, which is the estate value, right? Which is adding in the death benefit at the end of the day, right?
That's amazing.
So, but we didn't even get to that because we're really focused just on the income generation of the fifth option. And just know that I think there's a very elegant solution, which is if I give my money towards an annuity, I will eventually get it back. So that reduced or lost liquidity that I fret about is only temporary. Right? It will eventually come back to the family. And I think that's a wonderful way to recapture the dollars that you spent during retirement to come back to your kids. Right. Again, so again, the idea is that we want to protect our spouse first, but if we both live a long time, then we'll be glad that we took the higher income and we have the ability to give our kids the money that we put towards the insurance.
I'm putting you on the spot. How many retirement plans have you custom built in your lifetime, if you had to guess?
It's probably in the hundreds or low hundreds, at least, especially designing different things. We've done this
I think you're being modest, but maybe like
I do a lot of joint work with folks. We do a lot of speaking, so there's a lot of, we're trying to push this information out so that people know that there are options, right? That's the whole point to retirement.
So is it fair to say that you've done hundreds of custom plans for people and you see day in and day out how like this is not just the YouTube video we're doing, but like you're able to show people real time how they can have more? Yeah,
that's what I do in my day job is I help people go through their own projections, right? And so almost always, not every time, but almost always adding actuarial science is going to improve the scenario. And like you said earlier, even if it's on par with itself, just having a little bit less risk going on and maybe the death benefit and some of the attributes that life insurance brings to the table is certainly worth it.
Where does actuarial science not help somebody?
Well, so for example, on the death benefit side, someone could not qualify.
Yes, health-wise.
So the health issues could be a problem. It could be too close to retirement where I just don't get any cash value built up in time. And so, so later in the game, the life insurance can be a little bit trickier to institute.
Is there, let's say someone's in their 60s, could just do a guaranteed universal life policy if they wanted?
They could do a cheaper,
they could do a cheaper just to unlock the ability to do, when you run the actuarial science, I would imagine that if they could get life insurance would still be more efficient than having the joint annuity option. Yeah,
you got to run the numbers. And so as we get older, those annuity options pay out a lot.
Okay.
And so it could be to a point where a joint payout is just a better option than the guaranteed universal life option or a cheaper death benefit, permanent death benefit. And we just have to understand that we give up legacy components at that point, right? And for some people, that's just the reality. Because we got to take care of ourselves first, right, before we think about the legacy component. And so we just run all the math and all the numbers, and everyone has different preferences. There's some people that want to bounce their last check before they die, and legacy's not on their mind. Where there's other people that are fiercely protective about making sure there's something left over, and they may take a little less income to make sure that they know that their kids are going to have something. So really, it comes down to everybody's individual values.
Walter, is there anything else that you want to say as we're in the series? And this is very comprehensive. We went through the overview, 30,000-foot view, and then we went into different options. And hopefully, you mentioned to me, this is going to sound really repetitive. I think that's a good thing. There's some people that need to hear this multiple times, and there's some people that they're in the space, they help people, and so it's really helpful to hear someone like you that does this day in and day out, has written a book on this, walk through and talk through this. Is there anything else that has not been mentioned in this video that you think, man, if we stop hitting record, I would regret not saying?
Yeah, I think there's one thing that'd be fun to go back to, which is let's go back to the income efficiency test and see what happens now, right?
Yes.
What did we learn? So let's start with the first question, which is I want to generate my retirement income using the fewest dollars possible. Right?
We've showed you how to do that.
We've seen that either by the beat the bear approach, where we have extra income because of the permission to withdraw more. And we saw with Pension 2.0 where we actually got twice as much income with half the dollars, right? So we know that the 4% rule will always require more dollars to satisfy the income, right? So we know, check on that one. We need actual science to improve that one. The second was, I want to generate retirement income taking less risk, right? And so we understand that by having the ability to have that beat the bear buffer accounts, that we really can take out more income and we can navigate negative markets better than without it. And we also understand that we now have permission to take more risk potentially, but not because we need it for income, but because perhaps we can generate that for legacy or other purposes, right? We also wanted to ask the question, I want to generate retirement income with the highest level of probabilities, right? And so we know that we can use a 6% rule, which is kind of the same probability as a 4% rule, but we could also use a pension 2.0 where we have guaranteed incomes. And so now I have 100% guarantee on certain elements of my income, which can really help take away financial anxiety at that point. And then last, we talked about being able to leave a legacy. And so we know that having the death benefit in place means I have permission to spend down dollars, or I can give money to insurance companies knowing that all that money that I gave to them will eventually come back to the family. And so I think what we answered is that in order to answer those 4 questions, yes, we have to include actuarial science to some degree.
Ladies and gentlemen, help me in the comments. Give Walter a round of applause. Thank you so much for making the trek out here to share this. I think I see this as a key that's going to unlock future conversations. I'll say, if you've not gotten Walter's book, we'll make sure that there's a link down in the description. Heavily encourage you to get this book. And if you've read it, give it a review. It helps tell Amazon and other people that are strangers to this message that this book was great. And then obviously, if you appreciate what we do, thank you in advance for the people that are subscribing, that are commenting, that are help sharing this message. It tells YouTube that, hey, they're doing a great job, and it helps more people see what we do. And we're only able to do this because people watch. So thank you. And then if you're someone that's watching this and you're saying, hey, I would love to have a pair of eyes on seeing what I'm doing. I would even love Walter himself to see what we're up to and help custom build me something. We have a link down below for you to fill out. And if you qualify, we would love to help you in some way. And we just are very grateful for you, the viewer, that has stayed tuned to this meaty video. And Walter, I'm very grateful for you and excited for what's to come.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.